Hello, Rosemary. Yes,
Hello, lovely to see you.
yeah, how are you doing?
Very well.
Yes,
Happy to be here to share some important information.
yes, we are waiting for that. And welcome to the Global Virtual Summit 2025, Rosemary. And before starting your session, I want to introduce you to our audience.
Wonderful.
Yes. Rosemary is a TEDx speaker and executive coach known as America's premier bilingual public speaking coach. A former media executive and corporate spokesperson, she now helps leaders speak with impact in English and Spanish. Her clients include Amazon and Norwegian Cruise Line. She created the Zoom score for virtual speaking and will release her solo book, The Joy of Thinking Out Loud, in 2025. Based in South Florida, she also directs Pecha Night Miami and enjoys travel, cinema, and historic tours. That was really a great bio, Rosemary, and
Yeah.
all the best for your book publishing. And the stage is all yours.
Thank you. Will I be able to share now?
Yes,
Excellent. Hello, everyone. I'm Rosemary, and in the next 25 minutes, I'm going to be sharing with you highlights of a workshop that I do to help everyone elevate their ability to communicate in this medium, in this virtual world with greater impact. Because one thing that we cannot take for granted is that how you show up online can make or break your career and your reputation. And this is something that's proven with scientific research. There's been extensive work done, particularly at Stanford University in California, regarding the perception of executives' ability to lead companies based on the way they show up in these new environments, be it hybrid or all virtual. Of course, what happens in the real world in person is still obviously very important, but now we are living in a hybrid world. And if we know how best to use this medium to our advantage, then we can gain superiority and competitive advantage in whatever field we are working in. Because one thing that I want to show you is the why. And then I'm going to give you some tips from my Zoom score. I created something 4 years ago to help us manage through the pandemic on Zoom that gives you 10 points, 10 factors that determine a professional video presence. And I'm going to invite you to play the Zoom score game with me by evaluating some sample images from some real Zoom meetings. But first, let me give you all of the background that you need to know in order to have your eyes and your ears finely tuned to what you're seeing and what you do in your own virtual setup. Because we have only 7 seconds to make a good first impression. And that's something that happens the minute that you saw my image on the screen, the moment that you saw someone pop up on your monitor, you formed an impression of that person, whether you realize it or not. And increasingly, in our very, very hyper virtual world, that time span is shrinking from 7 seconds to possibly 5 or 6 or less. So our minds are now geared to have judgments and first impression registering based on what we see and hear immediately. TikTok is an example of that. So be very aware that how you show up in those first 7 seconds is vital, because we don't have a second opportunity to make a good first impression. And why is that? Because our brains are set up to be more attuned to visual data than to auditory. Let me say that again. The way our brains are wired is that we are far more receptive to visual data input than to auditory. So what we see takes on 90% of what registers in our minds. The 10% is auditory. So why not use this extraordinary breakdown to make virtual more human? And that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. Now, another important breakdown is that in terms of how we communicate human to human, 60% of what is projected, what is conveyed, what is transmitted is nonverbal. That means everything from the hand gestures to the head movement to the body posture to the movement in a space to the eye contact to the gestures, the smiling, all of that is considered nonverbal. When I say voice is 30%, it's the intonation, the pitch, the volume. All of those are factors that are the energetic delivery of voice, because most of you would know that voice is sound waves moving through the air, and that's how we make sound. And by the way, everyone's voice is unique as your fingerprints. So if some of you are saying, oh, I don't like the sound of my voice, you need to get over it, because our voices are as unique, again, as our fingerprints, and we need to use that as a way of establishing our brand. To go back to the cake, the 10% of what is transmitted are the words. So if you look at that 90%, which is the visual, the nonverbal, and the energetic delivery, you see how important it is to have your impeccable presence very carefully thought out. Sometimes you don't realize it until you see it. And that's why the examples I'm going to give you are going to help you understand a little bit of what I mean by these visual and auditory components that comprise your virtual presence, or what I would call in my world, the Zoom score. So I broke it down into an acronym that helps you understand the components of that professional presence. The first one is what's assets. It means assets. So the first one is appearance, how you look, how you're groomed. I'm going to go into detail on each of these, but let me give you a top line. The first S is the staging. By that, I mean, what is behind you? Where are you seated? How are you seated? The other one is the styling. All the things around you, from decor, from the virtual background, or from the blurred background. All of this is the styling. What you choose to wear as well is part of the styling. The E is energy and emotion, which is conveyed through the volume, through the rate of speech, through the energetic movement, how you move in this rectangular space, how you approach the camera or withdraw from it. All of that is energetic delivery. And then the T stands for technology, because we need to understand how to use all of the keystrokes and all of the factors, all of the clicks and places we need to go in our apps to be able to optimize our efficiency when we sit in front of the camera to start a call or to participate in a call. Every platform is different, and we know that even Zoom has updates and things change. So you need to stay on top of the technology, which includes your choice of equipment that you use. You may need to upgrade in some cases. So let's take a look at appearance. So appearance this is a perfect example of someone who's taken great pride in the way he looks. He is giving you a sense of approachability, of being human, likable, touchable, even though we're only seeing him in one dimension. And so this is a very curated image of someone who's going to be starting an author lecture, but he wants to invite you into his world. And into his world means going into a place where there's books, where there's knowledge, where there is learning happening. So he has taken great steps to give you that impression that you're in his parlor or in his library. What you wear, the colors that you wear, the patterns that you wear, all have bearing. I chose navy blue today. I would not have chosen brown because it might then blend in with the background of the sofa and the bookcase next to me. So these are all good colors that are very transmittable. In other words, they show up well on the screen. And mind you, you don't know how people are seeing you, whether they're seeing you on a tablet, on a huge 24-inch monitor, or on a mobile device where you're very, very small. And you also don't know the quality of that transmission, of that connection. So sometimes if it's a pink, it may look white, or it may look gray. So wear bold colors that will hold up wherever someone is looking at you, at your image. Do not wear, however, these patterns. These are very distracting. They are disruptive to the way the camera transmits your image. They are what we call moire patterns, like the one here in the center, polka dots, very, very busy florals, zigzags. All of these tend to take on a life of their own when they show up on screen. You've probably seen this happening on TV broadcasts and newscasts. You may not have noticed it, but I think from now on, you will start to notice this kind of effect. Sometimes you see it on a gentleman's tie. So avoid these kinds of busy patterns. And of course, always be careful that you're not clashing or blending into your background. Where you're seated, how you're framed is extremely important. That means this gentleman is positioned exactly where he needs to be, almost as if he's in a portrait studio. That means that his eyes are in that top line of the grid, and that he is seated in the middle of the frame, so that it's almost as if he's making direct eye contact with you. Most of you would have already in your app, whether it be Zoom or something else, a grid pattern that you can open before you set up your call to make sure that you're correctly positioned in the shot. So all of this also has to do with exposure, with focus, with composition, with depth of field, with all of the basic rules of photography. And obviously there's a lot more information here, which I cover in my workshops. The next of the acronym of assets is staging and styling, meaning that everything that this young woman has placed behind her has a purpose. She's telling you that she's approachable, that she is warm and young and fresh. There are flowers, there's artwork, there's a bookcase, there's a globe of the earth. So there's a lot of artifacts and decor that speak to who she is, her personality. And very often, this also speaks to what the person's profession would be. I have an example coming up on that. So this is all very deliberate. And see how she's positioned her body, her upper body. She's seated directly in the middle of the shot, looking straight at us. So all these are things that you can achieve as well. This gentleman is telling us what he does for a living. And so you might want to guess what he does. You might want to put it in the chat while I talk about it. But if you look at all of the graphics behind him, what's on his chalkboard, even the little figurine behind him on the bookcase, and of course the ball might tell you, and I don't see anything in the chat, but it would tell you what it is that he does for a living. Well, if no one wants to guess, I'm going to have to tell you that he is an American football journalist. That is his profession. And so he was doing a remote report on a game and on the strategy of a game. So this is something that you can do regardless of what you do. If you're into animals, into dogs, into music, you can have artifacts around you that denote what your passion is, what your profession is. So everything in your shot should speak to who you are and what you do. Okay. The next of the acronym is the E, which is energy and emotion. So it has a lot to do with you. Color has a lot to do with it as well. You want to have a vivid image when you want to convey high emotion. But you can also do it with your hands, with your head, with your movement, with your distance towards the camera or back to your default position. So you can do a lot with this very limited rectangle that we live in right now. And you can do that by projecting the energy and emotion as well as modulating your voice. Your voice can go up, it can go down, it can slow down, it can speed up when you want to say something that's really exciting. So you have like music that's played. You don't like monotone music. Monotone is boring. People are going to tune out. You want to keep people engaged. And that's one of the big drawbacks of virtual communication. We cannot respond or expect people to respond the same way that they would in person. So we need to change the rules of the game and adapt to the way that people want to hear and receive information, and the way they also want to be heard when you are leading a meeting where you are inviting participation. So, in terms of energy, right, we don't want monotone. We want a variety of pitch. We want to use our speed and our volume. And I can't stress enough how important it is to pause, to do a 2 or 3 second pause, which is almost like changing the chapter or going into a different section or giving people time to invite questions or to pose their questions in a chat. Okay. You can create a powerful presence with good body language if you know the language of the body. So it engages the arms, the head, and the hands. We're seeing examples here of Tim Cook, who was the man in charge of Apple, Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, and Eric Yuan, who is the founder and the president of Zoom. And they're all using their hands for what I call the digital exclamation points. You know, they're using their hands with fervor, with intention. The intention is an important key words, my friends, because you need to know that everything you do here should be intentional, not accidental. So your posture needs to be erect. If you can do this kind of call by standing or when you're standing, even better. Our voices sound better when we're standing, and our breath is better when we're standing because our chest is not compromised. You're not bending over. Even when we're seated, we have a tendency to bend over a bit. So we're not constricting our diaphragm and our lungs. So if you can be erect, if you can be standing up, all the better. Have your hands in view. Frame yourself so that you can use your hands and watch your facial gestures. These are just a small sampling of all the thousands of facial gestures that we make, either intentionally or subconsciously. So consciously, I may be wanting to smile right now, but subconsciously, I may just be lifting the corners of my mouth when I say something that's pleasant, or might be lifting my eyebrow to make a point of emphasis. So all these things, all of this is in your repertoire, but just understand that they're universal. Pretty much anywhere in the world or anywhere represented by the people participating in this call, there is understanding of what these gestures mean, with exception. There's always exception. Culturally, there might be exceptions. Okay, let's look at the technology. So we need to know how to work all of the buttons, the clicks, and know where to go so we end up looking professional and not like this. So the technology has to do with camera placement, with lighting, with background, with sound. And these are 3 examples of what not to do. The gentleman in the left with the blue bathrobe is not only improperly dressed, but his camera angle is looking up as opposed to being directly at 90 degrees to the lens, which is what gives the impression of, again, being as close to human as possible, as close to being able to touch me right now if I were standing in front of you. So you don't want to be looking up and you don't want to be looking down. You want to be looking straight at the camera, and you don't want closet doors open or sort of obscure things happening in the background. The woman on the right was standing with the light source behind her, which obviously means that the person is in shadow. And you don't want that, because if you can't be seen, what's the point of being in front of a camera? So I'm sure that you have seen, and sometimes maybe you have done this as well without realizing, that you have the light source behind you instead of in front of you. But look at the difference. Look what happens when you turn around and you have the light in front of you. Then you can see this woman. You can see what's important is to be able to see the whites of her eyes, whites of your eyes as well, and to not have shadows under your eyes. So that's sort of a rule of thumb, that's the way you want to show up. And the gentleman below is what I call, people in my world call, the hostage look. Hostage meaning that he's in poorly lit, poorly framed in this nondescript place that could be sort of a hostage location where he's making a video asking his family to send $1 million in order to release him. So it's called the hostage look because it has a sense of doom, of a discomfort, and it's not someone, he's also not properly groomed. So I don't know if I would buy anything from this gentleman the way he shows up in this image. So again, all these things are within your control. And I'm going to answer a question in just a moment. Let me get with this point, and then William, I'm going to answer your question. So this is another factor that you really need to watch for. Now, if you need glasses to see, obviously wear them. But what I want to show you is that where you can control how the light is reflecting on your lenses, do so. And you can do so either by using a non-reflective glass. If your prescription will allow for you to use non-reflective glass, see if you can afford it and if your optician can do that for you. If not, you can move your lenses, or the frame, I should say, of your eyeglasses just a little bit down so that it's not catching the light directly. But be very aware, particularly if you have a ring light like the woman on the right, that it catches the light directly, and then you have these very marked circles in the reflection, which are very distracting. And you don't want anything distracting the people at the other end of the call from what you're saying and what you have to share with them. So William, you ask how much of your message is truly conveyed through facial expression? A great deal. A great deal. If you remember the breakdown that I had with the cake, 60% is the nonverbal and 30% is the voice. So the 60% is what's conveyed through that facial expression. And I could mute myself right now, and you might be able to tell when I'm actually very excited about something or when I am just muted and sort of dry and professorial. So if I'm animated, if I am showing you with my face, with my hands, with my arms that I'm excited, that you might be more likely not only to pay more attention, but you will also, science has proven, you will retain more of what I say. So if you complement your movements and your facial expressions with your words, you have a winning combination. Okay? Wonderful. This is the Zoom score breakdown. These are 10 points. I've covered most of them already. I'll quickly go through them because I invite you to put in the chat how you would rate some examples that will follow this in just a moment. So the sharpness of the image. Am I in focus? The overall composition, all the elements that are in the shot, as if this were a painting or a portrait in a portrait studio. The framing, am I framed properly, or is my head partially cut off, or am I too low, or am I too far on the right or left? Or maybe I'm not showing up at all because I'm off the frame, off the shot. Poor lighting, like the examples I showed you. Eye level, eye line, looking down or looking up. Or what happens very often is we're sharing screens, so we may be looking at the side, like I have a second screen. So I may be looking over here, but you're not there. You're here. You're here. So you really need to discipline yourself, even though you're sharing, to always come back to center. And that center is right here. It's not on the screen that you're sharing, nor on the screen where I might see your images later on. Okay, so background choice, what you choose to put in your background. The styling, I strongly recommend that you don't use a virtual background without a green screen. And we don't have time to get into that product, but it's literally a green screen that goes behind you, which allows your camera to be able to capture your image and then superimpose it onto that virtual background, whatever it might be. You know full well that when you don't have green screen and you're there with a virtual background, if you move, if your head moves, if your hands gesture, it's going to look like you have a webbed hand, or your head's going to be like an amoeba. You're going to fade into the background. So I strongly recommend that you look at what you can do to have a live or living set where you have real things, artifacts, graphics, posters, objects that really speak to who you are. The distance from the camera, not too far away and not too close. The attire and the wardrobe and the grooming is a personal appearance. So indulge me in a moment. Let's take a look at some examples. And I want you to put in the chat whether you think that this image deserves a 10, being a perfect Zoom score, or a 5, or more or less, or a 1 or other. How would you rate Chris Evert, the tennis champion, based on the way she looks in this image? Could I have some numbers in the chat, please? 10 being perfect, 5 being more or less mediocre. No one wants to share? Is the chat enabled? Melinda? Because I don't see anyone inputting any numbers. Okay, well, in that case, let me continue. This would be probably a 7 because, okay, someone was inspired. What inspired me to create the Zoom score system? Well, let me answer that because maybe some people still want to participate in the Zoom score. What inspired me was that in the year 2020, as we all experienced, we were in the beginning of the pandemic, and we migrated our lives to Zoom. And what I realized was that people were not able to really use the technology correctly. And there was a big, big gap in knowledge in terms of how to not only use it effectively, but how to survive, how to counter the Zoom fatigue, and how to be able to use the technology to achieve what you needed to achieve without exhausting yourself and without feeling like you are stressed even more than we all were. So it was really to give people the tools to build the confidence, to build the expertise, to be able to conduct business and conduct their personal lives with some fluency and comfort as we navigated through the unknown phase that we were going through around the world. Okay, so if people don't want to weigh in on the Zoom score, we have another question: what facial habits should speakers avoid to maintain credibility? Well, I think we know that. What facial habits are not using your gestures accurately with what you're trying to say. So you don't want to be smiling when you're saying something somber, or you don't want to be grimacing or maybe even playing with your face, or biting your finger or your nails when you're trying to convey something professional. You want to be congruent. You want to be consistent with what you mean to say, with what is your intention with your communication. So you want to avoid it being incongruous, being out of sync with what you intend to say. So that's basically it. But be very aware of how you are conveying what you are conveying. Okay. So I'm going to stop there, but no, I'm not going to stop there because I want to show you some others that very bad examples. If someone wants to weigh in on the Zoom score. But nonetheless, what's most important is here. If you would please connect with me, I will be glad to give you a 15-minute assessment of your virtual executive presence. You can scan this, make an appointment. I have an open calendar through the end of July and would be delighted to continue this conversation with you. I offer private coaching. I offer group workshops and corporate work at a very, very high level with the C-suite to help everyone excel every time they communicate. And I do work with people with heavy accents as well. So I invite you to continue to stay in touch with me and to send me any questions as well that were not covered during my time slot. I have one more question. What are the most common facial cues that leaders overlook? I think that we covered most of that. I think smile more. Smile more and smile genuinely. The smile is one of those universal gestures that really transcends language and culture and will help people recognize you as a living, warm human being, as opposed to just being an image on a screen. Okay? Are there any more thoughts or questions before we wrap?
Yes, Rosemary, that was really an energetic talk. You have given a lot of information to our audience. And thank you so much for your valuable time, Rosemary. And we have more responses. We got more responses to your talk and more questions from our audience. Due to some this time constraint, we will post that to your email shortly, so you can
Okay.
respond there.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy
And
the rest
beyond,
of your day.
thank you so much. And be on the backstage and please join the next session.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye-bye.